How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of The Paradigm Shift. Today, we talk about instant versus delayed gratification. We'll get into the science behind pursuing one over another and the repercussions you face with instant gratification. So, let's kick things off by defining and understanding these different forms of gratification.
Firstly, today's quote is, if you don't have a consistent goal in life, you can't live in a consistent way. And as for today's discussion, the reason success is so hard to come by is because we live in a world of instant gratification. Naturally, people have been trained to want things right away or to go chase some sort of dopamine release, and that is so bad, but it's just you do it on autopilot almost. And the other side of this is people also like to live in the past, and they do this very much subconsciously, and I'll get into the science behind it later. But what I mean by that is, say you're someone who just landed an internship. You're going to go ahead and tell all your friends, you're going to tell your family, like, yeah, I got that internship and it's in a few months. The reality is, you got that a few months ago. Your inputs to get that internship were from a few months ago. That's when you were doing the networking, sending the emails, putting in the work. That's when you had the most inputs. Then you get that internship, then it becomes a waiting game. Okay, then you have the internship, you do it, and then a couple months go by and you're at a standstill. That is so dangerous, and so many people like to read their headlines of a couple months ago, when in reality, you always have to be pushing forward. If you look at the most successful people in the game of soccer, per se, Messi, Kevin De Bruyne, Xavi, Iniesta, the list goes on. What they are really good at is knowing what the next play is before they get the ball. They already know what they're going to do. We need to learn from that and apply that from our or to our life. When you get a taste of success, you have to double down on your inputs. If you get a job promotion, an internship, or anything along those lines, that's when it's time to double down and look ahead to what's beyond that, what's after that. As we know, success is very much a game of inches, and they're created in people's rules, routines, and rituals. A lot of people like to deny that. Why? Because it doesn't impact them in the moment. If you look at dieting, if you eat poorly for 1, 2 days, even a week, it's not going to impact you. You're not going to see a difference the next day when you wake up and look in the mirror. But when a couple months go by, that's when it really hurts you, and that's what we want to avoid.
I'm totally with you on that. Knowing the next play, or even thinking, being in the right headspace to want to move forward and to want to continue to progress, that's where we really need to alter our minds. A lot of times we think about just, X marks the spot and boom, you got the treasure and you're done. But that's not how it works. There's always going to be something coming. And if you keep the momentum that you already had, assuming, like, yeah, you got that internship, then you can apply that and continue to move forward. A lot of times we need to continue the momentum and consistency that we already have, that we're already pursuing. I would say that knowing the next play is very important, but yes, acting like you are going to do a next play is even more important. Continuing and having a better understanding of what comes next also makes it easier for you to progress in the short term and the long term. I got it. So, a lot of times when we're talking about internships and anything like that, making the next play, it's important to also understand, like, where you went right. Like, why did something happen? Why did you get that internship? Sean talked about how, you know, you really started months ago with their inputs, even just researching, trying to understand more about, like, the industry or just that job function, and then connecting with other people and having those conversations, learning the technical skills that you might need to, you know, answer in an interview. All of that is, like, all inclusive, right? And yes, that takes place over a long course of months or maybe even a year for some people. But understanding that you had to do something to get where you are makes it even easier for you to replicate greatness. Like, if you have won, don't just be satisfied with the win and don't just move on from it like it was nothing. Take it as a lesson. A lot of times we talk about failure or losses, and many people will say, hey man, don't take it too personally, just take it as a lesson. We also have to take our victories and our wins as lessons so that we can learn how to repeat them. Because what good is it to win just once if you can't do it again? You know, like the greatest basketball players, the greatest soccer players, They've won like the Champions League of the World Cup like multiple times because they know what they're doing. They have great statistics because they see what works and then replicate that. That's something that we need to implement in our own lives across really any endeavor. A lot of times people struggle with consistency in the gym or just consistency with their results. And to be honest, I think really any plan works as long as you stick to it. That's like a philosophy I have. And if you're not seeing results, a lot of times it's just because you aren't consistent with what you said you were going to do. And if you stick with to that for like 3 to 6 months, later you can change it. Sure, you can change it. No one's going to hold you to it. But consistency, like that, will pretty much deliver you the fruits of any gains that you want to see. And that goes across any endeavor in life.
We talk a lot about consistency, discipline, and all those things that fall under that umbrella. And the reason for that is because we want to, or you should want to, reprogram your mind. What do I mean by that? That is the answer to why you should be introspecting and why you should be seeking self-improvement, because you need to reprogram your mind. There's the conscious part of your mind and the subconscious part of your mind. We as humans are only aware of the conscious part of our mind. And the danger in that is it's only responsible for about 5% of what we do on a day-to-day basis. And on the flip side, the subconscious mind, what we aren't aware of, is responsible for 95% of activity on a daily basis. And that is also where your patterns, habits, and things of that nature are stored. Scientists have also found that we live 50% of our day on autopilot. So when we tell you to introspect or try and come up and have a consistent routine, we're trying to get you to slow yourself down a little bit. In a very fast-paced world in life that keeps moving forward, one of the best things that you can do is take a step back and assess where you are. Because then when you're just with yourself, you can introspect, and that's when you can tap into the subconscious. It takes a lot of mental capacity to realize what's going on in there. You would be surprised how many things that you've talked into existence or just do because your subconscious mind has been trained. It formed the habit, and you just perform those things on a day-to-day basis. So, in reiteration, I would like to say that your brain isn't hardwired. It's not, you're not going to perform one way your whole life, although it may seem that way. Anyone can change. It's just a matter of slowing down. That is why things like journaling are so important, because that's where the change is created. It seems so corny and so many people don't do it, but it is so crucial if you want to see change, because that's where you can tap into the true 95% of who you really are. And then that's when you form your rules, routines, and rituals that you stick to, and those get filtered into your new brain, and that becomes your subconscious mind.
I totally agree with you. I think what you're really getting at is that when you are able to slow things down, you gain like a new perspective. A lot of times in like video games or really like any sport, you'll have like these replays, and sometimes they're in slow motion or like whatever. But just the fact that you're able to replay a scene, journaling. That's essentially what journaling and having conversations with people and just reviewing your day, reviewing your actions, or sometimes like other people's actions. You know, you can learn a lot from other people, especially when you listen to them talk and like what they have to say to you, sometimes about you or about them. But with that being said, you're able to learn so much from a new perspective. And when you slow things down within your own life, you're able to see things more in the sense of a vacuum. And you're able to see yourself as if you were another person looking at you. And that can be kind of a complex idea to really get a hold of, but it can be really beneficial. It's not really meant to scare you. It's just meant to think about like how could you go about things differently. I think this was a quote, very simple quote mentioned years and years ago, but just about being the hero of your own story. And if you were the hero of your own story and they were filming like a documentary or like a movie about you, like everything you do would be like something super cool just to get to the next step. So sometimes it's a good way to act in that sense. Like, obviously, that is the opposite of slowing down. But what I'm saying with that is with the perspective that things are on the line and you have to move, you will move because you're trying to make a cool movie about yourself. and you want you as the hero to live this like crazy life. And sometimes I think we got to do a little bit of both. We got to slow down, think about our next steps, move in a calculated direction, but also we have to speed up because if we just sit around and don't do much, life is going to pass by. As Sean said, life keeps moving. So the best way to kind of go about this is a bit of a hybrid mix, understanding what your next play is. And then when it comes time to make that play, go all out and don't hold back.
There's a quote, one step back so you can take two steps forward. That's essentially what you have to do. You take one small step back, you introspect, and you have to be brutally honest. Only you're seeing whatever it is you choose to introspect on. Only you're going to see that. Just be brutally honest with yourself so then you can take two steps forward and go at that 110% speed that we always talk about on this podcast. One thing that I've done recently is I wrote down and introspected about bliss, which is essentially a state of being. It's not an emotion, but rather just your state of being. Whatever your purpose is, whatever makes you, you. I wrote what feeds my bliss, people, thoughts, behaviors, and actions, what takes away from my bliss, and same things, people's thoughts and behaviors. And then I kind of can see and filter through what needs to have more space in my life and what I need to double down on. And again, that's a prime example of me. I think it was like an hour and a half taking a small step back so I can take two steps forward, address the people who I need to create more space with, and thank the people who are quite frankly feeding my bliss and not taking it from me. Same things with my thoughts and actions. You're not going to be able to realize that in the moment because again, it's in your subconscious. The only way to do this is just by taking that extra second to slow down so then you can launch yourself into becoming the best version of yourself. Think of a rubber band. You slowly pull it back and it has that elastic stretch and then boom, it snaps. That's essentially what self-improvement is.
Are there certain examples of like bliss, both things that add to it and subtract from it that you could kind of go on about? Because that's something that I was like, you are right now inspiring me to do that like, right now, but I have to like, take some time to do that. But that's something that I think is really important for me to kind of want to feel happier on the day to day. I don't know if happiness is the right term. Bliss is sometimes it's a synonym, sometimes not. But yeah, what do you think are like some things that kind of add or subtract?
So Edwin, someone who we had on the podcast, he's one of very few people that feed my bliss but don't also take it. That's very rare to find in a person, and those kinds of people, you want to tell them and you want to keep them around for as long as you can. So in terms of people, that's someone who's done that. In terms of things that feed my bliss, for one, music does. I need more music in my life. Not the kind of rap music that gets people like in a pissed off state. Like faithful music is really good. I listen to this guy Ludovico Einaudi, really good to do homework to. Those are things that feed my bliss. Another thing that feeds my bliss, video games. I used to have a negative or associate a negative connotation with video games as in, oh, your brain's rotting, you're wasting time, you can be doing other things. But I took a step back and I thought about it, and realistically, that feeds my bliss. That's a part of who I am, and that's something that I enjoy. So why should I take that out of my life? So I learned I kind of want to loosen up on that definition, and if I'm efficient with my time, I can easily fit that into my day, even if it's for only like 30 minutes. That's still better than what I was doing a couple weeks ago, where I was like totally anti video games for some reason. In terms of things that take my bliss, I was writing about, and we talked about this before, my negative self talk and my internal dialect. Essentially, I realized that kind of, if you think of your internal identity as some sort of glass, when you have negative thoughts, or if you speak negatively about yourself, it's going to tap the glass, right? Imagine your internal identity and someone's just tapping the glass with the hammer really lightly. Eventually, it's going to crack, and your internal identity is going to just drop and drop and drop. And then that becomes your reality. And that happened to me for a while. So I, again, took a small step back, wrote about it, and then I addressed how can I be better about it. And it's honestly just a matter of throwing those terms out the window and realizing that people really don't think that lowly of me. And when I'm in the gym, people care more about themselves, and I'm probably not as weak or as I say I am. So that's another thing that I addressed there. And then there's also just some people I realized like they're definitely not in my innermost circle, but I still value my connection with them, even though they might take my bliss from time to time. I can manage that by putting a little more space there. That's not to say that their friendship, relationship, and my value with them, I shouldn't have to take everything away from there. Because if you start doing that, I realized I did that for a bit. I was way too harsh with people. I realized I only had like 2 people in my life. So I kind of had to loosen up there. And even though people can take bliss from you, that doesn't mean that you have to eliminate them from your life.
I totally agree. I think like that point that you're making about managing either people or things or hobbies, whatever it is, like that is such an important thing to kind of bring back into the discussion of instant gratification. Like you can do things that, are short term and like give you dopamine, like video games, right? But just as Sean mentioned, he doesn't have this negative connotation with video games, not nearly as much as he did before, because originally it was about what he could have been doing instead of video games. But now it's like a reward. Instead of playing games, instead of like doing homework, or getting ahead on school, or like networking, whatever it is, any type of work, it's something that is served after. And maybe it's like within your day. It doesn't have to be at the end of your day because, maybe that could keep you up at night or whatever, but just the idea of it being a reward, it being something that comes second to your priorities, that's something that's so important. Everything that gives you bliss doesn't necessarily have to be a priority because it might not be the best thing for you to do 100% of the time. But that's why it's important to manage. Just like another thing that Sean mentioned, when it comes to talking with people that sometimes give you bliss, sometimes take bliss away from you, you don't have to talk to them all the time. They don't have to be your only friends. They don't have to be your closest friends. They don't have to be the ones in your inner circle. You can manage all of these things and optimize it to what makes you feel the best and what allows you to live your best life.
I totally agree. And I'll share one more thing. I actually pulled up the list. One weird thing that feeds my bliss, being able just to be only with myself in the morning and at night. Because to me, that's the best time to take one step back before people are awake or before you go to bed and really assess where you're at. There's a lot of calmness, clarity, and serenity very early in the morning where you can kind of think about your day and think about where you are in life. And same thing before bed. And those are 2 great times to journal because realistically, after like 8 p.m., you're going to be doing nothing too productive. And if you are, I recommend you try and filter that into other parts of your day. And same thing in the morning. You probably aren't going to be doing something that needs to get done by like 6 a.m. at 4 a.m. So those are great times to really introspect, and those feed my bliss for me. And recently, I kind of lost touch with that, so it's kind of something I want to work back into my day, especially at night, having at least 45 minutes just to be with myself. Same thing with my faith, and kind of reconnect there and make sure that that is on top of my priority list. And with that said, thank you for tuning into this episode of The Paradigm Shift. We hope you've gained a better understanding of today's topic, as well as used some of our stories and advice to launch you into a healthier lifestyle. Be sure to tune into next episode, where we will continue to discuss other topics relating to health, lifestyle, and last but not least, self improvement. Stay mindful.